10th grade, and a school came up and to my mom randomly at a coffee shop, and they're like, "Would you have any daughters that would want to teach English at our school?" And my mom's like, "Yeah, of course." And a lot of you have heard this story, but when she came back and asked me, I was like, "No way, can't teach." I didn't think I'd make a good teacher. I was like, I don't have the patience for it, and surely God wouldn't call me to be a teacher. I was like, I was still in high school. How can I be teaching in schools? But I walked through those doors at the school that first morning, and I was like, there was 22 kids there, and they all turned and looked at me, and I was just like, God, I don't know what you're doing, but you really need to use me right now, and I can't do this without you. And that was the most fulfilling mission that I've ever done. I taught at that school for all the years that I was there, and it was just crazy. Recently I've been thinking about it a lot, reasons why people wouldn't do what God is calling them to. And number one reason, you're not called to go anywhere, to do anything. And that is just a blatant lie. All of you are called. All of you are called. God didn't create you and then be like, okay, well, when they turn 30, I'm going to call them somewhere. You're all called right now, right here. And it might be called to just stay home and work for all we know. But you are called. And if you're not feeling a call, I really challenge you to ask God what you're called to do, because you are called to do something. God created you to do something right now. He didn't create you and then decide to use you later on in your life. Rick Rhodes, some of you might know him, he once said, if those who look for God's will in their life will be looking for God's will for their entire life. Because God's will is right now. It's right here. And he's calling you right now to do something. It might just be to stay home. But he's calling you now. So you can't use that excuse that you're not called, because obviously you're called somewhere. So the second one is you don't think that you're going to really work it out. Okay, I'm just not going to fit into where God calls me. I'm going to hate it. For a long time, I was really scared to ask God where he was going to call me to, because I was like, he's going to call me to the Amazon jungle, and I'm going to have to eat rats for dinner or something. But that is the most ridiculous fear ever. God created us to bring him glory. And that's our purpose on earth, is to bring him glory. And he didn't make a mistake when he made you. He wasn't like, okay, well, I'm going to make Sarah now, and I'm going to call her to do something that she's totally not gifted for, and it's going to completely fail, and she's going to hate every moment of it. That is just bogus. It's God knew where he was going to call you when you were in your mother's womb already. And he created you with the gifts to do that. And so sometimes it's oh, well, I just don't know what I'm gifted at. Well, go try things, because all of us have gifts. And if you don't know what your gift is, try things. It's okay to start something and then stop it. It's okay to try something out and be okay, this is not what I'm gifted in, try something else. It's not a failure to learn that you're not good at stuff. And for me, I would have never started teaching if I didn't start teaching. I would have never learned that I love to teach. I would have never learned that that's a passion in my life if I wouldn't have walked and just been willing to go and start teaching. I wouldn't know that I enjoy public speaking if my dad hadn't been like, Sarah, you have 3 minutes and you're going to say something. And I walked up on that stage and my hands were clammy and I was shaking and my voice kept cracking and I probably sounded like a robot, but if I hadn't done that then, I would not be standing here now. So try things. And you know what? It's okay if you're not good at it the first time, and it's okay if you're scared, because I think God calls us to do things that we're afraid of. That way, he gets the glory from it. I had a mental picture a little while back where okay, life is you're standing on a board, and when you're okay, the board stands straight, and you can stand up, and you can rest, you can stand on that board because you've got this. But I think God likes to tip the board so that we can't stand on our own and we have to lean on him. And so I think that God calls us to do things that we're not comfortable with so that we have to lean on him and we have to cry out, Father, use me now. And you know what? In the end, when you walk away from that, you're like, wow, okay. I don't know what happened there, but God did something amazing. So that you can't use that excuse either. Like, you have gifts, you just got to find them. And you know what? He's not going to call you to something that you're going to hate. There's so much peace in being in God's will. And so the third thing is there's just too many obstacles. I'm too young. My parents don't want me to leave the house. All kinds of things, money. But again, like, if God's calling you somewhere, he's going to remove those obstacles. And like, just pray about it. Pray that, pray that your parents change their mind. I felt called to America 2 years before I ever moved back here. Did I enjoy my time in Thailand for those 2 years? Absolutely. I was supposed to be in Thailand for those 2 years. But for 2 years, I just prayed for America, and I prayed that, God, when the time is right, let my parents be okay with it. Bring it all together. I didn't know where I'd be staying until like 2 months before I came here. I didn't know what I'd be doing exactly. I still don't know exactly what I'm doing back here. But like, it just takes those first steps where you're just willing to, like, okay, God, I'm going to start down this path. And you know what? You got to just show me the next steps. I think that God sometimes starts us down a path that we don't really know where we're going, because if we knew where we were going, we'd probably turn around and run the other direction. Because if I would have known 3 years ago that I would be speaking at youth church, I'm pretty sure I just wouldn't have started speaking. But he like calls us into and like gets us started. That way, when we get to the harder stuff, we've already taken all the baby steps leading up to that. I think of, how many of you guys know the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Yeah, raise your hands. Most of you know it. Okay, this isn't Asia. Well, I'm going to tell it to you anyway, because I just, in February, heard it in a totally new way, and it just brought out a lot of new stuff for me. So, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, first off, I can relate to them in some ways because they were third culture kids. If you don't know what a third culture kid is, that's somebody that grows up in a culture that's not their own, and so they don't really fit into the world that they grew up in, and yet they don't really fit in their home country because they didn't grow up there and they don't really like remember the customs of that place. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were captured and taken away from their homeland and into a new place, so they were technically third culture kids. So they're in this new land, and the king calls everybody to come. And I just want to say I'm very impressed that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego showed up at that meeting, because I don't know exactly all the background behind it, whether everybody had to show up, or if it was like, oh, you know what, like, you're supposed to show up, but I don't know if they did a head count. Like, I don't know why Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't just hide in the basement. But they showed up, and it could have been so easy for them when everybody started bowing, just be like, I'm just going to bow, but I'm still just worshiping you, Lord. I'm not actually bowing to this thing. I'm just worshiping you, God. No worries. But no, they stood there. And when the king came up and gave them a second chance, I feel like I would have been like, okay, God, thank you for giving me the second chance. Like, now I've kind of made the stand, but now I can actually like bow down. It's going to be fine. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were like, no, we're going to stand, and we're like not going to fall. We're not going to bow down to this. And I think one thing that we often forget when we hear this story is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not know that they were going to live through the fiery furnace. Like, standing there, I feel like they really were like, okay, we're willing to give up our lives right now, and we're willing to die because we don't want to bow to a statue. And I just love what they said when the king was like, I'm going to throw you into the furnace. They're just like, you know what? You can throw us into the furnace, but our God can save us. But even if he doesn't. And I'm just like, that is just incredible. They were like, you know what? He can save us, but even if he doesn't, he is still our God. Like, they weren't just like, okay, you know what? Now we're going to get thrown into this furnace, and if God doesn't save us, then he's not our God. They were like, but even if he doesn't, he is still our God. And you know what? They like made the fire 7 times hotter, and these big soldiers, like, I don't know if they were the best in land, but they were soldiers, and they came up and they threw them in there, and the soldiers died. Like, how sad is that to be those soldiers? I just want to point out, like, to throw these guys in and like die doing it when they weren't even doing anything wrong. And then you guys know how it ends, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, like, God did come through that for them. And I think we often forget, though, that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their faith was incredible that day because they did not know that God was going to save them in the fiery furnace. They just knew that he was their God, and you know what? He created them to bring him glory. And that brought so much glory to him. And they were willing to totally put themselves out there. I think sometimes we forget that God created us to bring him glory, and he's going to do it somehow. And you know what? He is going to bring glory through us when he uses us better than when we just try to do it on our own. So, too many obstacles is not an excuse either. There's no excuse that you can throw out there for not doing God's will today and for not being willing to step out and face your fears. All of my greatest passions were once my greatest fears. I enjoy public speaking now. I love teaching. I love history. I'm in college right now. All of that stuff, when I was 10, I remember distinctly telling my dad, I'm never going to become a teacher. I was like, I am never going to become a teacher. I just don't have the patience for it. I also distinctly remember telling my mom I'm never going to leave home. I was the youngest in my family to leave home, so I guess I didn't really live up to that one. But I just know that there are so many times that I have been so scared to do something, and God has always come through. That's one thing, his timing is always perfect, and he always comes through. So it doesn't matter how scared you are or how inadequate you feel, God will always come through. And even if he doesn't come through in the way that you think, he's still going to bring glory to him if you're willing just to say yes. I challenge you to be willing to say yes to God even before you know what you're saying yes to. That's totally how I got up here today. I was in Thailand, and it was 2 weeks before I was leaving, and a thought came into my mind, and I was like, what if the church asks me to speak? And I was like, they're not going to ask me to speak. That would be ridiculous. And then it came to mind, and I just felt okay, but if they asked, would I be willing to do it? And I was just all right, God, if the church asks me to speak, I will do it. They're not going to ask me to speak, though. And then I came back, and Benita sent me a text, and she's like, hey, would you be willing to talk at youth church? And I was like, maybe. I'll have to think about that one. And then 2 hours later, I'm like, I did tell God I would do that, didn't I? And so I committed to it. But I don't know if I would have spoke up here if I wouldn't have already made that promise to God before that. But I don't know how that would have gone down. But I think that there are so many times that God calls us just to say yes, even before we know what we're going to be saying yes to. So, okay, we still have time. All right, if everyone could just stand up right now. I'm done talking about that. There's so many things I could talk about. All right. Okay, now that everybody stands up, okay, you can move around a little bit, wake up. Okay, now you can sit back down. All right, we're going to have any of you ever done the rain thing with a group of people? Tristan has done it. Okay, well then good. There's only one person. All right, what we're going to start doing is we're going to break you up into 3 sections. So we're going to cut it down right here, right down the middle. This is the first section. And then, Lyndon, if you join that section over, and then this section. Okay? So you're just going to start, just do what I do. Okay, first section, start snapping your fingers. Okay? Snap it loud, snap it fast. All right, second section, start snapping your fingers. Okay, third section, start snapping your fingers. Sort of sounds like rain, maybe? All right, first section, start rubbing your hands together. Okay, rub it down, rub it fast. All right, second section, start rubbing your hands together. Okay, third section. Okay, now start clapping your hands on your knees. Ooh, it's really starting to pick up in here. All right, start clapping your knees. Okay, and the third section. Okay, go back down to rubbing your hands. Okay, rub your hands. Okay, rub your hands. snap your fingers. Okay, snap your fingers. Okay, snap. Okay, everybody stop. Okay, good exercise in rain. All right, I just have one more story I want to share with y'all. In October, I had the worst, greatest trip of my life. So living in Asia, I was able to travel to a bunch of different countries, and I went on a lot of trips, and I learned a lot of things, and I could talk about each one of my trips. But this trip really had an impact on my life for a lot of reasons. And I'm like, okay, the worst, best trip is like an oxymoron. I'm an English teacher, I know that. And I say it was the worst trip because it was the hardest trip I've ever been on. I was on a team of 7 people, mostly just my siblings, actually. And we were gone for 14 days. On day 1, my sister broke out with a fever. It was a relapse from a fever she had had that week. And it was just the start. We were in Kunming, China for 4 days. Caitlin was sick for 3 of them. I was sick for 1. We traveled Wednesday. Nobody was sick, which was a miracle because traveling there is terrible. We go to another part of China, which I'm not going to say here. And we got there. It was 2 days of traveling. Friday we got there. Somebody else falls sick. Saturday, somebody else falls sick. Sunday, somebody else falls sick. And yes, each one of us fell sick every single day that we were there. It is not fun to be sick in China. You know how when you're away from your house and you get sick and it's like, oh, I just wish I could be home right now and curl up in my bed? It's even worse in China. It was 16,000 feet. Our altitude was 16,000 feet. We think we got food poisoning. If you've ever had food poisoning, it is not fun to have. We were staying in 2 rooms, guys in one room, girls in the other. It was just a living room and a bedroom. And we had cold showers to take, and there was no heat where we were, and it was 20 degrees outside. And yeah, we were just all very sick. And the one evening, and this is why I say it was the best trip I ever took, 3 of us were sick. I was sick, one of my friends, and my youngest brother was sick. For those of you who know, Zachary was sick with us. It was 2 a.m., 1 or 2 a.m. We were all up because we were all sick. And we were in the living room, and there's actually other people trying to sleep in the living room. And all of a sudden, Zachary was just bawling. My brother is 15 years old, and he was just laying there because we were sleeping on the floor, and he was just bawling. And I got up, and I walked over, and I sat by him for a little bit, and then I was just like, Zachary, are you okay? And he's just like, Sarah, I am in the presence of God. And I was just like, what do you even say to that? And he's just like, it is just so amazing. And he's like, sometimes you think about heaven and you think that you're going to get bored. And he's like, no. He's like, God is amazing. And so him and Heather and I gathered in a circle. He actually couldn't sit up for a long time, but when he could, he sat up, and we prayed, and we were worshiping, and we were singing for about 2 hours that night. And in that moment, there was just so much joy in that room. And it was an incredible moment, as close as I've ever felt to God. But that's not why I call it the best moment. Because I learned in that moment, we were all sitting there. We were not getting better. I mean, you would cough so hard, you would puke. And that continued. We'd be worshiping, one of us would have to leave to go puke or whatever. It was not that suddenly we were healed. And I realized, you know what, sometimes we're in so much pain and we just call out to God and we say, God, take away this pain. And he doesn't. But in those moments, he is still there, and he's still going to give you the joy that you need, and he's still going to give you what you need to get through. He might not answer your prayers exactly. I just wanted to be better and not be coughing so hard and to not feel sick anymore. But in that moment, I realized it's okay to not have my prayers answered exactly. It's okay to still, feel that physical illness And yet, like, God was still there and was still willing to work through that. And never forget that. Like, when you're terrified about this new adventure, or when you're out searching for the gifts that God has given you, God is still there, even when you don't always feel it. Like, sometimes I feel he feels distant, but like, he is always there, and he is always, always ready to listen. And like, he didn't forget you. He did not make a mistake when he made you, and he did not call you to do things that he will not help you get through. So that's what I have to say.